Today's episode needs a content warning for discussion of suicide. Have you ever seen pictures or video of a hoarder house and just wondered, what is going on? I mean, everyone has a different tolerance level for clutter. But hoarding is not just an issue of having a messy living environment. It's actually classified as a distinct mental illness. The American Psychiatric Association says hoarding is characterized by a persistent, intense inability to discard possessions, leading to significant clutter, distress, and impairment in daily living. My guest for this episode is one of my favorite people, my friend Margy. We've known each other for years through the podcast industry, and she actually told this story originally here on What Was That Like back in 2022. Lots of things have happened with Margy since then, so stick around till the end for an update from her. Margy was an adult when her dad died. She came back home and saw the job that had to be done, and she channeled her grief into energy. And what seemed like an impossible challenge didn't defeat her. Rather, it made her unstoppable. Real people in unreal situations.
The eerie silence when I walked in, and he's just staring at me.
I was like, hello, are you okay? And then I had to tell him it was me.
There was just blood everywhere.
They're shouting, they're screaming, they're being hit by bullets, they're hitting the ground.
And in that moment, I literally thought, this is how I die.
Everything changed then.
And I just thought to myself, this isn't happening.
Every single story deserves to be heard.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? Have you ever caught yourself deciding to keep something rather than throw it away and thought, oh, wow, I'm becoming a hoarder?
Yes, all the time. And it's like one of those things where I think so many of the things I do in my life are sort of like doing the opposite of what my parents did, which I think is true for a lot of people. But having learned so much about hoarding after realizing that that's what I was experiencing in my home growing up, one of the pieces of research on hoarding is that it gets worse as you age. So someone who is really a severe hoarder at 70, at 30 and 40, it was probably much lighter than that. So that fact alone, and I hope I haven't made your listeners too paranoid, but that, yes, because I always think that what's this going to look like in 30 years?
That's definitely something to think about. Well, we need to give a little bit of background on this and what kind of led up to it. You were living in Taiwan for a couple of years as an English teacher, but you previously lived in the U.S. What made you decide to go and live abroad?
I fell in love with travel when I was in my junior year of college because I grew up in Rhode Island. I went to college in Rhode Island. I just stayed in Rhode Island. And I think most of my life up until this turning point that we're going to talk about, I was very stagnant. I felt stuck. I felt like a victim about it. I was one of those people who the decision was no decision. I just kept defaulting into these situations and then kind of mentally complaining about them. But there were these moments, right, where I would feel an impulse to actually do something that was different, that sort of broke the script. And studying abroad was one of those things. After dragging through college and not wanting to be there and just not really participating. And I don't think college is as valuable as most people think it is, but But my attitude did not help. And after all of that dragging, it was like I heard about studying abroad. And I was like, I want to do this. Like, I want to live in Italy. It'll be so great. I was an art and Latin major. So I was like, this is a great opportunity to become a better painter. At that point, I wanted to be a professional artist, a professional oil painter. And so I was like, this will be great. And it was just this sort of like different moment. Like I just suddenly switched it up. And that's what I really love about travel. It has the ability to shake things up. And I think when you feel stuck or you get into this routine, even if it's a good routine, being able to go somewhere far away for a little bit, you're like a different person. Like you're more yourself, you're more present, you're discovering things for the first time. When you're out of your routine, I think you realize how much your routine kind of starts to control you and how much more there is to you and how much more free you actually are. And so that's why I love travel. And because I had fallen in love in my junior year of college with that feeling, and especially living somewhere where I hadn't even visited before, I wanted to do that again. So I wanted to move somewhere that I had never even visited. And then I went down this rabbit hole of teaching English, and I was looking at South America. I was looking at Asia, narrowed it down because I learned that you can make a lot more money in Asia. You can save a lot more money than you can in South America, at least at that time. And so that's how I picked Asia. And then I knew nothing about Taiwan. I had just been researching the best countries to teach English in. It came down to Korea and Taiwan. I was planning to go to Korea. I got a background check, all the stuff that they require. And then I read something online and I was like, you know what? I think I want to go to Taiwan. And so pivoted, ended up going to Taiwan.
And then fast forward 2 years, you were miserable. What happened that caused all that to change?
I mean, my misery wasn't because of Taiwan. I love Taiwan, but it was everywhere you go, you take yourself with you. And I think when you're somewhere short term, like those benefits of travel we're talking about, when you're somewhere short term, you really do experience things as new and like you're this different, more open person. But once you live somewhere, no matter how exotic or cool it is, you get into a new routine. So that's kind of what happened to me in Taiwan. It's like people are like, oh, that's so cool that you live in Taiwan. And it's like, it is cool. But also you go to work, like you go to the grocery, like it's really different, but it's also kind of the same. But it wasn't Taiwan's fault, although it's swelteringly hot and I didn't like that. But it wasn't because of Taiwan. It was really because of my mindset. And this was a mindset that I had, I think, kind of my whole life of really just kind of depressed and anxious and neurotic and negative and just really one of those people who's like always expecting things to go wrong. When something good happens is like, what's the catch? Or when is this going to get worse again? Like really just a pessimistic mindset.
When we talk about what changed, it's so difficult to lose a parent, even from natural causes. Had you ever considered that your dad might be suicidal? Were there any signs?
No, not at all. And it's like one of those things where after the fact, you look at things and you're like, should I have known based on this stuff? But like, I mean, he was on antidepressants, but like, who isn't? I mean, not who isn't. Like, I'm not on antidepressants, but a lot of people are, and it doesn't mean they're suicidal. And no, honestly, if you had asked me like, who in the family is going to kill themselves, he would have been my last guess. Like, I would have thought my mom would have. Sorry, mom, if you're listening. But like, he was just like this rock for the family. Like he, when we were just like both like melting down, he was just like calm, cool, and collected, breaking the tension with a joke, making sure everyone got where they needed to be on time. Like he was like the rock of the family. He was like, anytime anything happened, I'd be like, Dad, help me. And like, so no, I didn't see the signs at all. I knew he was kind of quirky, but no, it was nobody, even like his psychiatrist was like shocked. Everybody was totally blindsided. And from talking to other survivors, that's more common than people think. There are people who die by suicide who've had attempts and stuff like that, and that doesn't make it easier. But he was one of those people that it really was like totally out of left field. And when I found out that he had died, I was like, oh my God, he had a heart attack or something like that. So no, like no idea. I still can't believe that happened.
Can you just describe the experience of getting that news?
Yes, I can. I left school in the evening. I was teaching a few different classes, but one of them was this really rowdy class of first grade boys. And they were just kind of rough because they were boys. And one of them like was joking about like killing a cat or something. Like he wouldn't have actually done it. It was just like being crazy. But I was like, actually, that's not funny. Like, let's talk about compassion towards animals. And then I went to the Taiwan SPCA, who I was fostering cats through. And I said, hey, can I get you all in here to talk to these kids about being kind to animals so that we can like have an impact here and they'll think differently, because they do think a little bit differently in Taiwan about animals than they do in the US. And I raised money from all the teachers who wanted them to come, to pay them to come speak. They like brought a dog and it was great. Like the kids prepared questions. They were really engaged. They were really interested in the dog. So as I'm walking out of the school to go catch my bus, I'm like feeling amazing because I just pulled off this thing that had been months in the making that I'm like, wow, I like really had an impact here. Like these kids are going to be more compassionate towards animals. Like that was amazing. And then I looked at my phone and it wasn't a smartphone because it's really hard to get a smartphone in Asia as an immigrant. So I had, it was like a really old school regular phone. And I had a text from my partner at the time that just said, I love you with no punctuation, which is like, it's just one of those things that's like not a great sign. If you know someone always uses like exclamation points and stuff like that, like, and you just, yeah. So I was like, that's weird. And I had the thought like, oh, I hope something didn't happen. And then I had the thought of, I hope, and this is terrible, but this is what I actually thought. I was like, well, I hope if something did happen, it happened to his family and not to mine. This thought happened in a second, like, but then it was gone. I didn't ruminate on it or anything. It was just like there and then it was gone. And then I got on the bus and I'm reflecting on the day and all this stuff. Like I really didn't think anything was going on. So I get off the bus, I walk to our apartment, I go up, we're on like the 9th floor, I go up the elevator, I open the door, I've got like my big bag with my like books and stuff to grade in it. I walk in and it's like a tiny, like the smallest studio apartment you've ever seen in your life. And I walk in with my bag and I'm walking across to hang out my bag. And I looked at my partner and he was someone who has like an olive skin tone and he was like white. He looked like a ghost. And I'd never seen him like that. And when you see somebody that you know really well and they're just like, so I could feel it in my body. I could feel like my cheeks tingling. I was starting to feel like cold and kind of like clammy in my hands. Like it happened so fast. So I hung up my bag and I'm like in the closet where I keep my bag, like hanging up. And I'm like, what's up? And he was like, you need to call your mom. So my parents were still together. So like people say call your parents, you know what I mean? Like when your parents are together. So I was like, huh. And so I'm like starting to panic, but it's like there's two things going on because I've got this rising panic and I'm starting to feel, and I can feel it now, I'm starting to feel like sick to my stomach, kind of like that's rising. But then there's also this part of me that's like, well, like maybe it's not as bad as it could be. Like, let's like, still trying to almost negotiate with reality. And so I'm like trying to get hints from him because I don't like surprises. Everybody knows this. And I always demand information from people trying to do surprises for me. So I'm like, what happened? And he was just like, you just need to call your mom. And I'm like, how bad is this? Thinking that if it's not the worst case scenario, there'll be some reassurance, right? Like if nobody's dead at that point, you'll say nobody's dead. And he didn't say that. And I'm like, okay, but still there's a big part of me that's like, no way is this happening to me. So I was like, I remember saying, is it the worst thing that could possibly happen? And he just said, you need to call your mom. So I'm like, oh shit. Like, so I put my bag down. Also, it's 5 a.m. in the US, and he's saying, call your mom right now. He's not saying anything to reassure me. Like, it doesn't look good, but there's still an analytical part of my brain that's like, okay, you know what? He had an accident. He's in the hospital, but he's going to be fine. It's really serious, but he's going to be fine. Like, it's just like happening so fast. And so I remember walking across, and it wasn't a lot of feet across because it was such a small apartment, but walking across the floor from my closet to this desk that was like a computer desk and a dining room table and like a catch-all of all the things where my computer is. And it felt like if you've ever seen someone try and bring a horse somewhere the horse doesn't want to go and they're leading it by the face and it's just kind of like pulling back. I felt that. So like I saw that picture and that's what it felt like. It's like I knew I was walking towards a totally different life. And I was like, no. But there was this inevitability. So it's like I didn't want to get on Skype and find out because once I found out what was going on, I knew there would be no going back. But I was like, no, I'm not ready for this. Whatever it is, like, no. I sit down at the computer. I call my mom. Of course, Skype is like beep boop, which is just like not the right mood. Know your audience.
Right. Very upbeat.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm just like, my hands are very, very cold at that point, and my stomach is very tight. And I feel this like tingling sensation in my face. My nervous system is just like kicking off. So my mom answers on Skype. It's 5 a.m. her time. She's not a morning person. She's up. My mom has like blue hair. The color changes all the time, but it was like blue at this time. It was like clipped back. She had no makeup on. I can see that she's somewhere different. Like the background is not our house. And so I'm very quickly taking all this in without being super conscious of it. So I'm like, hey, mom, what's going on? Like, never one to mince words. She says, Dad's dead. He killed himself. So keep in mind, he was not, in my mind, a suicide risk. Like it was just, and for someone like me who had been so neurotic and spent so much time ruminating on possible bad things that could happen, even I had never thought of this. And I thought I had thought of every unlikely bad scenario. So I'm sitting there with her. My hands start shaking really hard, like really violent shaking, which again is like the nervous system going into fight or flight. And so I'm like, what happened? And she was like, we don't know. They need to look into it. There were some propane cans, but we don't know what happened. And then it was this wild thing. So I'm like shaking and freaking out. But I immediately go into like comforting her because there was like this survival part of my brain that was like, he's gone, protect the one you've got left. Because I'm very nervous now. Like if he would do that, like, is she okay? So I was just like, everything's going to be okay. We're going to get through this together. Like I just started reassuring, which was kind of surprising to me as a response. So the rest of the conversation is kind of a blur. She tells me she's staying at her friend Caroline's house. We had a lot of pets at that point because I take home stray animals a lot. So they had my 2 cats plus some other pets. So they had like 5 cats and a dog in the house. So she's staying with her friend. She said that people are going to the house and she's going to the house to take care of the pets. Then I got off the phone. I picked up my phone. I called my boss, who was like a good friend of mine at my teaching job. And I said, hey, Michelle, I'm not going to come to work anymore because my dad's dead. He killed himself. And she's just like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm just like, I don't know. Okay, bye. And she's just like, what? So it was crazy. And then I felt like I was going to throw up. The stomach issues, the stomach pain of that type of trauma was like a big part of it for me.
So you knew immediately you had to go home.
Yes. And I had been planning, I was coming to the end of my second year teaching anyway. So this was January, he died on January 12th. I found out on January 13th, which is insane. Like having no idea that someone's dead and just like going about your normal life. But I was planning to come home in a few months. My teaching contract was about, I think, maybe a month from ending. And then I was planning to spend 2 months backpacking around Asia. And then I was going to come home and like find a real job. So at first it was like, what do we even do? Because it's like, I had to go home, but it was like this big international move. And you're really not in a headspace to be making big plans like that when you're grieving at that early stage, but you also usually don't have a choice if you're an adult. So I ended up, they cremated him. We did a viewing that I was Skyped into, which was absolutely insane. And then I decided, because I had been planning this backpacking trip for 2 months, to modify it to be 1 month, but to still go and travel around Asia for a month and then come home. I don't know why I made that decision. I just felt like it was something that I needed to do.
Wow, I didn't know that. So there was a month in between before you actually got back home.
Yes, there was more than that because I needed to like do some stuff in Taiwan with my taxes. I had to close out all my bank accounts. Like there was just all this logistics stuff and then plan this trip. And then we went traveling for a month and went to like Vietnam and the Philippines and Thailand, which was a bizarre trip. And then I spent a lot of money. I was like, why did I do this? But like, I just didn't feel ready to go home and everything was handled. Like the pets were all set for a month. Like there was nothing really urgent. And so I knew that once I went home, I would be dealing with this and there would be no going back. And I think I wanted to put that off a little bit.
When you tell the story, do you ever get the impression that people are thinking, okay, her dad died and then she went on vacation and then went home? That just seems kind of odd. I mean, do you have to explain that to people, what the reasoning was behind that? Or maybe they don't even ask.
I mean, no one has ever asked that. I feel like they must be thinking it because I would be thinking it. Like, I don't have an explanation. I know it's weird, but the whole situation was weird. Before he died, I had been planning to come home and clean the hoarded house. I was like, I'm finally going to deal with this. They're going to get on board. Like, we're doing this. And like, they were not happy to hear that. And they just kept being like, whatever. And I was like, nope, we're going to do it. It's going to be great. I'm like researching cleaners to help who are in Rhode Island. And I'm like writing manifestation, affirmations, and gratitude literally every day, like a psychopath of like, I love my parents' beautiful home. Like it was like, I was like, I had lost my mind. And I'm also, of course, like, and I'm so grateful for my dad's health and happiness. Like just this like manic gratitude practice. And so when he died, it was like, we had these plans to go on this trip and then to clean the house. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go on this trip for a month. Then I'm going to come home and I'm going to clean the house. So I was helping to plan the memorial service virtually from the Philippines, like via email with the funeral director and my mom. And yeah, it was bizarre. And then I got home. By the time I got home, it was March. So he died January 12th. I got home at the beginning of March. It was not good. It was the winter of 2015 for anyone who lives in New England was like memorably brutal. There was like 4 feet of snow on the ground, which is not typical. And it was like brutally cold. And it had been one of the most depressing winters, people said, for a while, which I'm like, I wonder if that contributed. And so I got home and that's when the journey began of cleaning the house and working with my mom and like trying to rebuild.
So once you were done backpacking and you thought, okay, now is the time to go home. And you've got that plane ride. How long was the plane ride?
It was, well, longer than it should have been. So I flew from Taiwan to Korea, which is quick. But then I flew from Korea to Dallas, which I think was about 11 hours. But Dallas got a snowstorm, which for Dallas was 1 inch of snow. But they weren't equipped to deal with 1 inch of snow. So the entire city and all the airports shut down. So I got stuck in Dallas for 48 hours. I mean, a long time. I couldn't get my bags back because they had already checked and like moved on. So I was stuck in the Dallas airport with no toothbrush, no change of clothes, nothing, like going through the worst experience of my life, sleeping on the ground, eating vending machine food, like calling my mom, crying, like, Mom, what do I do? Like, how do I get home? And she's just like, I don't know. I don't know. And it was just like, it was crazy.
And then the flight from Dallas to Rhode Island is probably, 5 hours maybe?
We couldn't get a flight to Rhode Island. So it was like one of those situations where you just keep booking and booking and booking flights and they just keep canceling. So we were trying different airlines, we were trying different airports. We eventually got a flight to New York because my partner's family lived on Long Island. So we flew into New York City because it was the only flight that we could get after 2 days in the airport. It was from a different airport in Dallas too. So we drove to a new airport without any bags and then took this flight from that other airport to New York because that was the only thing that we could do to get close to home. And so then we were with his family for a day or two and then took the ferry to New London and then drove from New London to Providence.
It kind of sounds like planes, trains, and automobiles, trying to get from the international version.
Yeah, it would have been a stressful travel experience, even if my dad hadn't just killed himself. But like with that in the mix, it was, I was like, it was one of those things. And this was a theme from kind of this point through finishing the house clean of like just this stuff that was like, this cannot be happening. Like there's no way that this many bad things could happen in a row. Like this seems made up. I kept feeling like am I on a movie or a TV show? It cannot be real.
Somebody's going to jump out and say, you've been punked.
I really thought that.
So when you've got all these hours, like even the 11-hour flight to get to Dallas, all that time just to sit and think, what are the thoughts that are going through your head about what you're about to get into?
I mean, some of it is a blank. It's sort of like those early days, those few months afterwards, it's like new realizations just keep hitting you. I remember this moment on the flight. I don't know if it was the flight to Korea or the flight from Korea to Dallas, but I was just sitting there holding my passport because we had just had to show them. And I just like mindlessly opened my passport and my dad's my emergency contact. And I was like, what do you do if your emergency contact is dead? Like it was just all those little things that you don't think of at first just keep hitting you like, oh my God.
Well, let's talk about when you finally got back home. First of all, was this the house you grew up in?
Yes, basically. We moved into that house when I was in 4th grade. It is a 6-bedroom Dutch colonial built in 1900. It's a big house.
And I have to ask you this. As far as the hoarding, was it mostly your dad or was your mom also a hoarder? Because, I mean, hoarding, from what I know, it's a mental health disorder. So it would seem kind of odd that they would both have it.
Right? It's hoarding is a spectrum, like I believe all things. So it's tough. Like hoarding, I also believe, and there's a lot of different types of hoarders, and there's a lot, I mean, the research on this is emerging, but hoarding can result from a lot of different things. Some people associate it with people who have types of OCD. there's a lot of correlation between trauma and hoarding. So that it's not necessarily that there's a chemical issue, it's that all this unprocessed trauma can lead to this disorder, this attachment. They've also done research showing that people who are hoarders or who have a tendency towards hoarding, which a lot of us probably have but don't act upon because we're feeling good and we're taking care of ourselves. But they did experiments where they scanned people's brains, and the part for hoarders, the part of the brain that's associated with really strong emotion lit up over kind of minor objects, whereas for someone who's more average in that area, more typical, that didn't happen. And so they did experiments where they had junk mail and they let the people sort the mail and say, this is junk. And then they shredded the junk mail in front of them and scanned their brains. And there really was this like heightened emotion from people who were hoarders. So there's a lot of complexity to hoarding. There's also, I took a DNA test and there's a genetic marker that I have that is possibly shows difficulty parting with objects that are no longer needed. And so there's like this complex web of things that create this situation, I believe. I think trauma plays a big part in whether or not that tendency gets flipped on or not, which I believe that both my parents and most people have gone through trauma, and their generation was not as vocal about it. And as, they didn't understand it as much. So it wasn't the type of thing that you like tried to get help for. You were just like, walk it off. So were they both hoarders? Yes. Like it wasn't always so bad. Like my mom is very, very ADD. And so she has a lot of trouble with organization and spaces and stuff like that. My dad's hoarding was more this sort of indifference. Like it sort of seemed like just a lack of care. Like he just didn't care about the mess. He sort of lived like 19-year-olds. There's just trash and bottles. And like, if he can't find something, he'll just buy a new one. It was less an attachment to the objects and more just kind of an indifference that I think stemmed from a lot of unprocessed trauma and depression and just not caring about himself and feeling overwhelmed. Whereas my mom, I think, has more of the typical attachment to objects and the like just overwhelm at like trying to understand how to organize things. So there's a spectrum. The combination of the two of them together with the pets, with them both working long hours and not having a lot of time, not having learned the skills for how to manage a house, which is a skill, right? Like learning how to, it's not, I think people think it's this thing that you should just know how to do, but it's not. And so that was sort of the perfect storm. So I would say that's a very long way of saying it's both of them, but it's complicated.
Can you describe walking through the door the first time when you came back home?
Yes. It was freezing cold. I got out of the car. My mom was like frantically trying to shovel the steps. And I like walked over to her and she doesn't even like look up or acknowledge me. She's just like frantically shoveling. And I say this with no judgment because she had just been through insane trauma. But I was like, I haven't seen you in 2 years. I was like, hey, mom. And she was like, hey, like, and just like really focused and stressed about the stairs. And I was like, okay, this is going well. I walk in the door. I've got like the strap, my bag is like digging into my arm. But of course, there is nowhere to put my stuff down. It's freezing in the house. There is stuff everywhere. There is no clear surfaces. And the smell of cat urine is so strong that even in the cold weather, it like burns. This was, I think, the beginning of March, but it was like a really long winter. Like it was freezing still.
So you were planning to stay in that house, right? While you were doing the cleaning. Was there a place for you to stay? Was there a room that had space for you?
Not really. So the setup was I used to live on the 3rd floor, like was a really nice setup. It's like since 4th grade, I had that space which my wife says is why I'm so spoiled now. But it's like 2 bedrooms and there's a full bathroom up there. So that was like my space for me and my cats. But my dad had taken over that space while I'd been away. So it had been trashed. And there was just like one twin bed that with like a really hard mattress. So it wasn't like my partner and I were both there. And it was like, it was not in a condition that you could stay up there. So there was just like this spare room, which like the whole house was just like spare rooms that were full of stuff because it's like a big house full of bedrooms that are unused. So the rooms are just labeled by the color that the room is, not by the function because there is no function. So there's a room called the blue room that had a big desk in it, had like all these papers, just like clothes and piles of stuff. And there was just, my mom had bought a new mattress, which to her credit, thank you. And so there was like a new memory foam full mattress in the middle of this room that was like full of junk, but there was nowhere for my stuff. And so we just slept on the mattress on the floor in this random room full of stuff. And I just remember waking up in the morning when it was light out and realizing that a cat had either thrown up or like pooped right next to the bed. And I'm just like, great. This is lovely.
Well, I guess that helped you decide which room to clean first, right?
Yes. And cleaning it was such a process. Like it was such a phased process because first we had to get it to the point where I could like live. And then when my partner went back to be with his family in Long Island for a little bit, I would just sleep in my mom's bed with her because it was like, it took a long time to carve out a space for me.
Can you just describe what was in all these piles of stuff? What was it?
Just like nothing like really noteworthy. Like it wasn't like tons of like newspapers or anything. It was just stuff like clothes, fans, papers. It just tons of stuff, extension cords, all the objects that you would expect to see in a house, but like at a huge volume and everywhere. And like the thing that made it really challenging was the pets, because when you have pets, you can't have piles of stuff places, especially if you have cats. I love cats, but like if you have a cat, you probably know that cats love to pee on piles of clothes. Like it's like a rare delicacy for them. And so they can't help but treat themselves. And when you don't clean up a pet's mess right away, other pets and they will continue to mark. So it was like the rugs, the clothes, like the furniture under the clothes. Like it was just stuff had like soaked through. There were piles of like shirts and New Balance sneakers of my dad's in a closet. And it had been peed on so many times that the rubber on the shoe had melted to the hardwood. Like I was like, how does this chemically even happen? Like, so there were so many layers, right? Because you get the stuff off, but then the thing under the stuff is so damaged. And so it was just layers and layers and layers.
You seem like a really organized person. Like you would look at a project and plan it out. Like this is how we're going to do it. Did you come up with some kind of a plan to tackle this? I mean, it would seem overwhelming to start with.
Yes, I am pretty organized. I like to just tackle things. I had spent 2 years in Taiwan thinking about how I was going to tackle it and researching, which was helpful. But when I got there, it was really overwhelming. And I think it was like because my dad had just died and like I might have given up with enough pushback if my dad had still been there and just been like, you know what? Okay, it's your life. But like knowing that I was going to leave my mom to live in this house alone as a widow to rebuild her life, I was like, I can't, this has to be dealt with. So if I had felt like I had had any choice, I probably wouldn't have taken this on or I would have quit. But that feeling of not having a choice was helpful. So this was such a great experience too. I mean, it was like it was the worst experience, but in terms of like business, this was the best experience because I came into a seemingly impossible situation with none of the skills, experience, or team that I needed to deal with it. And I had to just figure it out. And everybody told me in the beginning that I couldn't do it. They were like, no way. It's too much. Don't take this on. You've been through enough. There's no way you can do this. I had cleaners come in and tell me the house was going to be condemned, that I should just give up. They told me there's no way I could even do anything with the house. And I was just like, I mean, I would cry. Like I was affected by it, but then I'd like keep Googling and find somebody else. So the first thing I did was try to find someone to help me, which I think is true for business too, is the smartest thing you can possibly do is like find someone who does this seemingly impossible thing all the time and knows how to do it. And so I was looking for an expert in cleaning and hoarding after talking to some truly horrible people who were just like said terrible things to me or about the house and just made me feel hopeless. I found this woman, Nicole, and she was like, this is what she does. She had this like kind of crappy Comic Sans font like website. But when I read her website and she talked about why she does this and why she feels like compelled and moved to help hoarders, I was so touched because she was the first person who approached it with compassion. I had her come over, her and her husband came over. They looked around the whole house. And after so many people telling me to give up, the house is going to get condemned, you can't do it. Nicole looked at me. I love this woman. She looked at me and she said, you're so strong. You've been through so much. I'm so sorry for your loss, which no one had said. And then about the house, she was like, this isn't even that bad. We can totally do this. And it was like, finally. So that first massive breakthrough came from finding the right who.
How did your mom handle that process? I mean, was she able to help or was it just all you? Or did she kind of say, no, we got to keep that one thing? Or how involved was she?
Yeah, my mom is scary. Mom, if you're listening, I say that with love. So she was a federal prosecutor. She was the first United States attorney, the first female United States attorney in the state of Rhode Island. She's a scary lady. So, and I say that with respect. She was not on board. And it was a real, it added a big layer of complication to be working with someone who wanted at first to block me. And it wasn't her fault, right? If you come into anybody's life and you're like, cool, we're going to change everything, no matter who they are, they're probably going to be like, get lost. Add on top of that they've just lost their husband to suicide. Like, and you're like, hey, gonna need you to go through this box real quick. It's like, get away from me. So she was not happy, but there was a part of her I could tell that was more willing to work with me than ever before. And I don't know if her resistance had been broken down by the loss. I suspect it had more to do with the fact that she felt really sorry for me because me and my dad were really close. So the fact that I had lost my dad to suicide, I think made her more willing to work with me out of pity, which is fine. I'll take whatever I could get to get the job done. And so she was really resistant at first, and it was just like fight after fight. And in the beginning, it took her days to go through a single box, and she would be, mad at me and really like grumpy and negative and like kind of making mean comments. And I'm just like, this is going to be a long time. If it takes this many days to go through one box, like this does not look good. But bringing in Nicole was really helpful. Having a third party come in is really helpful to get people on better behavior. And so like there's things that just like, if your family tells you, you're like, shut up. But if a really compassionate expert comes in, you're kind of like, okay, like they're saying the same thing, but it hits different because it's a different relationship context. So Nicole was really helpful in getting my mom to cooperate. And then we did hit this point. So it was like pushing a boulder up a hill for a long time, like months of like basically fighting against my mom when she was trying to block this. But then we hit our stride. We started hitting this momentum, and she started getting pretty good at going through stuff, and she started working with me. And like, I don't know if she just gave into the inevitability that this was going to happen and I wasn't going to back down, or if the momentum just made it easier, or both. But we did get better and better at working together once we got that initial momentum.
How long did it take? You just used the term months. How long did this whole process take?
It took exactly 5 months because I moved to Colorado the day that we finished. It took exactly 5 months. I took one single day off. And I'm not a grinder. I don't work like that. I'm not one of those entrepreneurs who's like works at 5 a.m. and is the last person to stop working. No, I am not a grinder. I don't work well that way. But this project to hit this deadline required that. So every single day I woke up at like 5 a.m. and I would start cleaning around like 6 or 7. I would finish around like 8. I would fall into bed, make my to-do list for the next day, go to sleep, wake up again. 5 months every single day. And it was amazing that we were able to get it done in 5 months.
It must have been difficult to do that every day, not just because of the hard work involved and such an overwhelming project, but you were also still mourning your dad at that time.
Yeah.
That must have been a mental strain.
Well, it was and it wasn't. I think that having a project like that helped me to channel a lot of energy into something. And I think it somewhat served as a distraction. But also, I think because it was a suicide, because I was out of the country. So not only did I not get to see him before he died, like you would if he died of cancer or something, I didn't see his body afterwards. Like when I saw him, I hugged him goodbye at Logan Airport in 2013. And the next time I saw him, he was in an urn. So there's not a lot of closure there. And so being able to physically process his stuff and go through and touch every single thing that he owned and make a decision about throwing it out or donating it, it was really powerful. And honestly, what I felt most was I felt that it was an honor. My dad was an amazing person. He was like the funniest person I've ever met. And I'm not just saying that because he was my dad. Like he was like really funny. He was so smart. He loved animals. He was just such a wonderful person. And it was an honor to be able to do that for him.
Can you talk about the moth infestation?
Yes. So this is one of many things that happened where I was like, this cannot be real. This is insane. So I'm going through room by room and like we're doing pretty well. And I open the door of the orange room because like I said, they're named after colors because they have no function. I open the door to the orange room and I'm just kind of like looking around and kind of taking stock of the different piles and like started making a game plan for the room in my head. And then I'm like, oh, like a little moth. Like, isn't that nice? I see like a single little one of those like small moths like fluttering. And I'm like, oh, so beautiful. And then I see another moth and I'm like, huh. And then I realize that there's just hundreds of moths in the room. And I'm like, this is a horror movie. It's like I look closely and they're like eating the drapes. They're like swarmed over this one part of the carpet, eating it. They're like in all the boxes. And I'm just like, oh my God. So I like close the door. I'm horrified, but I'm also laughing because my dad had this really irreverent sense of humor. And I just thought of like, all the people I've heard say like, my loved one visited me as a beautiful butterfly. And I'm like, of course my dad visited me as a swarm of moths because he thought it would be so funny. So I'm like, okay, well, you know, this is why exterminators exist. So I start calling exterminators and they didn't believe me. They were like, no, that doesn't happen. Like that doesn't happen with that type of moth. And I was like, I'm telling you, it's happening. And every exterminator I called wouldn't help me. They were like, sorry, we don't do that, which again was one of those things where I was like, how is this possible?
It seems like it should be an easy job. You just put one of those cans where you bomb the room with some fumes or something and just kill all of them.
Right. And I was like, why can't an exterminator do this for me? And that was such a theme of like going to professionals and being like, this is what's going on. And then being like, no way. Like, and I'm like, yeah, of course. So eventually I went that DIY route of like, all right, we got to set off a bug bomb. But the house is like full of pets. So there was a lot of logistics because I had to find a place for all the cats and stuff to safely be while I did the bug bomb, and then enough time passed. So I did that. It was many more steps than I thought it would be, like everything in that house was. But we do the bug bomb, everybody's safe, the pets are in their locations. I clean up all the little moth corpses. That room is now full of cedar. Like there's just like cedar in random places because I just can't take a chance again. But so we did overcome the moth infestation, but it was just one of those things that it's like you wake up thinking that you're tackling one problem and then you end up spending days on this thing that you're like, this shouldn't even be happening.
Can you just describe seeing the truck haul away that last bit of stuff?
Yeah, when the truck took the dumpster, it was crazy. That was like either the day I was moving or the day before. Like it was like the very end. It was incredible. First of all, I had become attached to the dumpster because throwing things in a dumpster is really fun. And being able to just like throw things I was like dumpster crazy. I lost myself at that dumpster. Then I got really crazy about people not like throwing their garbage in it. And like if I saw them, I'd like go outside and be like, that's not your dumpster. I really lost myself. I had a very small world.
Dumpster territoriality or something. That's kind of odd.
I know. My mom still calls me the dumpster queen because I was like obsessed with this dumpster. Yeah, the truck comes, they cover it over, and then they drove it away. I guess I couldn't believe it. The amount of stuff that was gone and like coming to an end. When you're in a project like that, you just are so in it, in the day to day, that you don't pick your head up that often. So to finally pick my head up and to have it be done, and like the house, like people said the house looked like it was like staged for sale, like empty. I had managed to get all the cat urine smell out of the hardwood floors with a variety of aggressive home remedies. Like it was incredible.
This essentially was an impossible project that you took on, and you did it. You won. How did that change your outlook on your life?
The change wasn't immediate, but it totally changed my understanding of my own abilities and my understanding of what's possible. And the interesting thing is I feel like in books and movies, this huge breakthrough happens and then that's it. Like things are great. But that's not really what life is like, right? Because it's just this never ending thing. So it's like there was this huge high with finishing the house, this big victory. And then immediately we started driving with the U-Haul and my cats to live in Colorado, which I mean, I probably should have known that was a bad idea to like go somewhere where I had no job and no friends and no support right after losing my dad. But I was just like, well, we got to like keep going and go with the plan and carry on. And he had gotten into a PhD program. So I was like, well, we're going. And as I left and like drove to Colorado, the grief and pain that I had been avoiding / channeling into the house project started to really catch up with me. And so when we got to Colorado, things went downhill very, very fast with my mental health, with how my relationship was going. It was very bad. And I hit a series of rock bottoms. And then it was through coming back from that I reached my full capability as a leader with the lessons I had gotten from the house clean. But I really had to go down further to go up.
Since then, you've done some pretty amazing stuff. I know the company that you're with now, you started as a $15 an hour employee. Now you're the CEO of that company. And we could probably talk for an hour just about that process. But can you kind of summarize how did that happen?
Yeah. And so much of how that became possible was because of what I got out of that house clean, like the attitude, the things I learned about tackling seemingly messy, impossible problems, which is so true for business, especially early business. And then also the personal growth work I had to do. Like I had to eventually get into trauma processing therapy and like process losing my dad and process all the stuff before that I hadn't processed that got kicked up by that loss. So I did so much work on myself as a person. And then also the combination of that and having taken on this huge project and succeeded, that when I came into this situation and I knew I wanted to work from home and I wanted to start my own business. And I was trying to start a business in the fitness industry and it was not going well. But I really thought like that's what I wanted, was a fitness business. And so I had been connected with Jess, my business partner now, because we worked together and we actually didn't know each other that well. And we're just like vaguely connected on social media. We reconnected because she adopted my dad's cat when he died. And so she went from this person who had been like a colleague who I didn't know very well to like someone who was really on my radar, because now she's like sending me pictures of kitten. And that was such a bonding moment. So it was like all these things came together. I wanted a remote job. I saw Jess posted on Facebook that she was hiring 1099 part-time contractors at $15 an hour to book people on podcasts. And I truly had no idea how I would financially survive with a contractor position, no benefits, paying self-employment tax, part-time hours, $15 an hour. But I wanted to work from home. I was tired of driving in the snow in Colorado with no four-wheel drive. So I interviewed, I got that. And then things started happening very quickly from there. I started listening to my clients' podcasts and really getting to know them, listening to their interviews. And I was like, oh, I want to be a business owner. Like, this is amazing. I'd already been trying to start a business, but as I got to see all these success stories in different industries and like I started learning, like I started Googling, what is SEO? What is content marketing? Like these things I was hearing in the episodes. This was 2016. This wasn't that long ago. And I didn't know any of these terms. So my relationship, so actually working with Interview Connections is going great. The rest of my life, not great. I don't really have close friends in Colorado. I didn't want to leave the house. I just wanted to be home with my cats. My relationship is going very badly. So we end up breaking up. And almost exactly a year after arriving in Colorado, I leave Colorado to go home and live with my mom, which felt like a new rock bottom. But there was space for me because I had just cleaned out the house. So that was the silver lining. So I'm 27 and I'm going back to live with my mom. I start going to therapy and taking therapy like incredibly seriously. And Jess asked me at the end of 2016, I'm a contractor that whole year, and I just started taking on leadership responsibilities and like looking for ways to improve the company and to improve my client experience because I really wanted to do a good job. And she asked me to become the first employee of the business at the end of 2016. So I say yes. I go home. I cry my eyes out to my best friend because I don't want to be an employee. I want to be a business owner. But, she's like, this is going to be a great opportunity. So I show up January 2017 as the first employee. And then we have the rest of the team as contractors besides me and Jess. Almost immediately, Jess heard an HR person speaking about contractors versus employees and was like, we need employees, not contractors for what we're doing. So in a very short time, we got rid of all of our over 10 contractors and hired local in-state Rhode Island employees. And I was like in charge of this and I had no experience. Like I was in way over my head with this, but I had just come out of this house clean. So it was like all of this stuff that kept coming up. I was like, I'll figure it out. Like no problem. Cause I had this new confidence that I wouldn't have had before that I can basically figure anything out. And so it was a very steep learning curve. Mistakes were made, but like just bringing that attitude that I had developed of like, we can do this, no problem. Anything that hit us, it was like, no worries, we can deal with it. And there was definitely like crying and those moments, but I had processed so much in therapy that I was just like so resilient. And Jess and I started a podcast, Women-splaining, that I wanted to start because I wanted a podcast where we could just like talk about anything. And we did talk about death on that show too. We were partners on that project. We would work on it on Sundays. And then we started to talk about partnering on other businesses and potentially starting a media company. And she knew I really wanted to be a business owner. So we were talking about all this stuff. And then we started talking about potential equity and interview connections. And so the end of my first full year as an employee, we're in these kind of negotiations. And I asked for 50% equity. And then there was like a counter offer. And I was like, look, I'm not going to take less than 50% equity. I'm not being a diva, but I just like, I want to have equal risk and equal reward. And I don't want to feel like anyone's my boss. And if there's uneven equity, it's going to feel like there's an imbalance of power. So it wasn't a negotiation tactic. I just like stuck to my guns. I had a vision to bring the business from 400,000 to $1 million in a year. I was like, we can do this. Here's how, here's all the things that we can do. Like we can do this. And ended up getting the equity and was co-owner at the beginning of 2018.
So your optimism maybe was a little bit contagious with her, thinking, wow, this could be a really big forward step for the company. And obviously, as I've seen, and a lot of people have seen what's happened since then, it's been like skyrocket. One of the things that you talked about on your podcast was the stuff that you discovered that Malcolm Gladwell wrote about. And well, just explain that. It's just fascinating to me. What did you find?
Yeah, this was so fascinating to me too. So I started down this rabbit hole because I was looking to create content and I was working with a great coach, Jacqueline Nagel, who helps people with messaging and content. I was looking to create more content around my lived experience and was struggling to sort of explain what happened because it was like, I was like this kind of negative, miserable person. And then my life fell apart and I lost my favorite person in the world. And then I was like so much more successful and happier. And it was like, I wasn't really sure how to explain that. And so I did research as I was kind of creating content and seeking to better understand this. And I started stumbling on the primary one being by Malcolm Gladwell, these studies about the connection with grief and high performance. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, like this is it. And so he coined the term eminent orphans and did studies of these highly influential people like presidents and all this stuff and found that for these people who had been presidents, who were super influential, who had more than one paragraph in the encyclopedia, they had a much higher percentage of having lost a parent than you would find in the general population at that time, which I thought was really interesting. A lot of it is focused on people who lost parents young. When my dad died, I was 26. So I wasn't like super young, although I felt young. I think I was sort of floating around and not taking responsibility and kind of killing time by being an English teacher. But there were some older ones, but I just found it so interesting, this correlation between loss and high achievement. And why is it? Why is it that some people fall apart because of loss and some people, it seems to be a catalyst for this expansion? And so that is my interest in that is what led me down this rabbit hole of starting my podcast, We Get It, Your Dad Died, where I interview high performers and high achievers who have gone through a substantial loss. And I talk to them about not just what happened with the loss. Usually it's a death of someone very close to them, but I've had some people talk about sexual assault and some other things. And so we talk about the loss, but then they also share about these really incredible, unexpected gifts that they got out of this experience that helped them have a much bigger impact and show up in a more powerful way. And it's just, hearing these stories has been so incredible and really in an anecdotal way supports what I learned from Malcolm Gladwell about this connection between high performance and loss.
Yeah, it is. When I heard you talk about that I never would have guessed that, but obviously you have kind of lived that out. And you and I are friends on Facebook. I subscribe to your podcast, and so a lot of the content that you create, I consume. And I have to say, you're honestly one of the most insightful people I know. You have a gift for figuring something out and then explaining it. And I'm like, yeah, I can use that. So I hope you keep doing that. And so let's talk about your podcast. It's called We Get It, Your Dad Died. And that, when I first saw that title, I thought, that is so odd. Where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for all that nice stuff you said. That means so much to me. And I'm so honored to hear that and happy. Yeah. We Get It, Your Dad Died is a weird title. And I think it had to be sort of weird for it to feel on brand with me and with my dad. My dad had a very irreverent sense of humor that he has passed on to me. And so I came up with that title as a joke. It was not going to be the actual title because my business books people on podcasts. I am a client of my business. So I get out there on podcasts all the time. And that's a big part of how my messaging and storytelling has evolved by getting interviewed on so many podcasts every single month. And I just kept telling the same story. It just kept coming up, right? Because the loss of my father is such a pivotal piece of my leadership and business journey that I end up in some way talking about it on every show. So it just got to the point where it just felt like I was talking about it so much. And so I just made the joke to someone I was working with of let's just call it We Get It, Your Dad Died. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to keep that. And I'm always worried that guests are going to be super offended, especially if they lost their dad. But everyone's been very cool about it. And it is a respectful show. But I like the irreverent title.
It is. And you can be respectful and still have some humor, even awkward type humor, I mean, a lot of times you go to a funeral, it's not just everybody being sad. Somebody will be telling a story about the person that died and everybody laughs because, something is funny.
Yeah, there's a lot more comedy in death than I would have imagined. The aftermath of my dad dying, those dark moments were so dark, but there were moments where we laughed so hard because it was there would be something that was so ridiculous or so him. And especially when you're in a dark place where there's so much tension, you just laugh that much harder. And like I said, my dad was so funny. He was the funniest person in the world. So as sad as we were and as hard as it was, there were a lot of moments where we would just lose our minds, belly laughing.
How can people find your podcast? And you do a blog as well. How can people find all that? How can they contact you? Give us all your contact stuff.
Yes. So my podcast, We Get It, Your Dad Died, and my blog both live on my website, which is margy.com, MARGY. And you can also, obviously the show's on Spotify and iTunes, and it links out from the website there too. And then if you want to just connect, if you heard something that you want to chat about or you have a shared experience, the best way to do that is probably to DM me on Instagram. My Instagram is at HeyMargy, HeyMargy.
Hi, Scott. I can't believe it's already been almost 4 years since we recorded our episode together. So much has changed since that time. So most importantly, I became a mom when I had my daughter Ozzy in November 2024. And I have also added 3 new rescue cats to our family, which, as you'll remember from my story, cleaning up cat pee was a big part of my journey. And so luckily, these cats are doing well. Everybody's behaving themselves, so that's good. At the end of 2025, I exited my company, Interview Connections, the podcast booking agency that I was co-owner of and CEO for 8 years, which was a really big transition for me. But I left so that I could pursue my dream of really helping people and being in the personal development and growth space. I am now the co-owner and CEO of another company that is fully aligned with my purpose of helping people find healing and transformation. The company is called brainbase.com, and we help our clients achieve healing and transformation through the vehicle of nervous system rehabilitation and somatics, so working through the body. By creating safety and presence within our own bodies, we can then radiate that out into every aspect of our lives. And I'm really passionate about this because it's a modality that has completely transformed my life and my healing. And it's something that I came to after experiencing the trauma that we talked about on our original episode. So I'm so grateful to be able to live and work every single day, helping people experience the healing and the transformation that I am so grateful to have experienced myself. My mom has some exciting updates too. So her home is going through another massive clean out as we speak. And this time she has professional organizers helping her instead of me, which is great. I'm getting a little break. It is being completely emptied out and staged over the next couple of months in preparation for her to sell it. She is moving to this really cool independent living co-op, which is really close to where I live and really close to where her house is. So she's staying in her neighborhood. She is so excited and so thrilled for this next chapter. And the fact that we already did that big clean out in 2015 is making this process much easier. So I'm very excited in about a month to be able to walk through the house, and it's going to be totally emptied out and staged and painted. And I think it's just going to be such an incredible full circle moment. So I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you so much to the listeners.
I'm really happy to be connected with Margy, and it'll be fun to see what's next on her journey. She's not creating new episodes for her podcast now, but the show is still available to listen. And if you're interested in getting a 2-week free trial on her membership site for nervous system healing, you can do that at freeneurotrial.com. I'll have that link in the episode notes at whatwasthatlike.com/250. And speaking of podcasts, I want to tell you about a way to discover new podcasts that you might not otherwise hear about. My friend Lauren sends out a free email newsletter to tell you about shows that she's discovered and recommends. She listens to about 30 hours of podcasts every week and then writes about them. It's a great source for discovering new shows. You can sign up free at podcastthenewsletter.substack.com. And I'll have that link in the episode notes also. She doesn't know I'm telling you about this. So when you sign up, tell her I sent you. She'll get a kick out of that. If you're in the Facebook group, you saw that the question this past Tuesday was, what's an opinion you changed after getting older? I know I've changed my mind about a few things. What about you? Come on over and tell us about it. We do questions like this every week at whatwasthatlike.com/Facebook. Graphics for this episode were created by Bob Bretz. Full episode transcription was created by James Lai. And remember, you can sign up to support the podcast by going to whatwasthatlike.com/plus, or on an iPhone, just click on Try Free. And you'll get every episode ad-free, plus there's more than 50 bonus episodes that are exclusive to supporters. And now we get to hear the listener story. This is how we end every episode, with a story sent in by a listener. You can record a story on your phone, roughly 5 to 10 minutes long, and email it to me, scott@whatwasthatlike.com. This listener recalls something she did in school as a first grader. Stay safe, and I'll see you here next week with new episodes on Tuesday and Friday.
This story takes place back in the early 80s. My family and I lived in Germany on a military base. I was in first grade, and I had the most awful teacher. This is the kind of teacher that would make me hate school from here on out. But particularly, she was essentially the Wicked Witch of the West. She had this yardstick, and she would smack us with it. And I mean, we wouldn't see it coming. It was a yardstick. But it was just for the most minor infractions. You know, you weren't sitting correctly or didn't have your pencil out, stupid things. Anyway, one day we were sitting on the floor and it was story time. This was right before the end of the day. And boy, did I have to pee. I mean, I'm in first grade, bladder the size of a thimble. I raised my hand. She ignored me. I kept it raised, getting increasingly frantic. And finally, she tells me, "Put your hand down. You're not going anywhere." And I said, "I have to go to the bathroom." And she said, basically, "Tough luck. You know, it's the end of the day. You'll be going home soon. And this is story time. You're not going to interrupt." And I was dying internally. All I could think about was how bad I had to pee. I can still think about it right now and feel that urgency. I somehow managed to breathe through it, and it was the end of the day. But man, I was not going to make it to the bathroom. But usually I'm, I don't know, very shy, just want to dive into myself and not be seen kind of little kid. Something in me snapped that day, and I looked at her chair. And, yeah, I thought to myself, I can do this. She deserves this. So when her back was turned, as she was helping get all the other little kids together, I snuck to the corner of the room, hopped up on her chair, and man, did I pee. I peed, and it overflowed, and I don't know how nobody saw me do it or heard it, but nobody saw me. I jumped off the chair, pants are soaking wet. I grabbed my backpack, and I had a jacket, and I tied my jacket around my waist, and I left. So my mom picks me up, and we're walking back, and she notices that I'm soaking wet, and she asks me what happened, and I told her that the teacher didn't let me go to the bathroom, and I couldn't hold it. Did not tell her about the chair. But I guess the teacher put two and two together, and my mom got a call from the principal. We all came in, and the teacher was just so mean. I don't even remember what she said to me, but I was just, like I said, I was so embarrassed that I did that, and just, I hated any attention, good, bad, or indifferent. And so she was up in my grill trying to get me in trouble. But when it came to the point where I told the principal she didn't let me go to the bathroom, it kind of changed. My mom got mad, and the principal got mad at the teacher. So it really kind of backfired on her. I did take that opportunity to tell them that she also hits us with a yardstick. I don't know if anything ever came of that, because it was, I guess, legal at the time. But yeah, she did get in trouble for not letting me go to the bathroom. And I think I got my point across quite clearly, because any other time that I had to go, I was always let go out of the class. And I think about it to this day. I would absolutely 100% pee in her chair again if I had to.